I thought it was fantastic. It was a great weekend for the UFC. I thought UFC 287 really lived up to expectations. I got to start with this Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira fight because obviously this was the fight that everybody was talking about going into the weekend, and it lived up to expectations. Israel Adesanya knocks out Alex Pereira in the second round, which, to be quite honest with you, I wasn't expecting. The lead up to this fight, I was banking on the idea more times than not that Alex Pereira would win this fight over Izzy. And I have to say, man, I got to give Israel Adesanya a lot of credit when he reclaimed this title from Alex Pereira. The fact that he let Alex Pereira not walk him down, but the fact that Pereira was pushing the pace and was limiting the space in between himself and Izzy and got Izzy's back up against the cage. This was very similar to what we saw in the last fight between these two, where Alex Pereira was able to get a finish against Israel Adesanya. Granted, Alex Pereira won in a TKO in that last fight because the referee called it off. But essentially, this was the same predicament that Izzy got himself into in the last fight. But I have to say, Izzy baited Pereira, which was something I was not expecting. And when Pereira was raining down some shots, and Alex was landing some good shots against Izzy when Izzy's back was up against the cage, Izzy hits two shots back to back on Pereira. The first one stuns him, and the second one just drops him. It was a phenomenal knockout. I mean, Alex was out like a light. And the fact that he did it in the second round so quickly, man, I really got to give a tip to the cap to Izzy because I just wasn't expecting Izzy to knock him out. If anything, in the lead up to the fight, I was expecting that Pereira would more than likely get a knockout if one were to happen in this fight. Fortunately for Izzy, he was the one that was able to land the knockout and reclaim that middleweight belt, which was just a phenomenal showing. And, when it comes to the aftermath of the fight, when you look at Israel Adesanya, he's cleared out that division. And, I don't know what Israel Adesanya's future plans are, if he's going to stay in the middleweight division or if he's going to move up. I mean, he did have that one fight at light heavyweight against Jan Blagojevich a couple months ago. It was not a couple months ago. It was probably over a year ago at this point. But outside of that, Izzy would have a pretty difficult time, I think, moving up to light heavyweight simply just because he's so slender to begin with. Granted, he's extremely athletic. No, never going to take that away from him. But the weight difference for him moving up to light heavyweight, I think, would be a stretch. So I think more than likely he's going to stay in that middleweight division. And then when it comes to Alex Pereira, obviously with him, he loses the belt against Izzy. But I think at this point, I think Alex is going to move up to light heavyweight. I think when you look at Alex's body structure to begin with, I think that light heavyweight division is more suited for him. The fact that he was able to cut weight so effectively, to have these middleweight fights up against Izzy was really a sight to behold. Because Kevin and I, we were just looking at the physical structure of Alex Pereira. This guy walks around at like 220 pounds, 225. And the fact that he's able to cut weight effectively to get to this 185 mark is really a testament to his work ethic because I don't know how that guy does it. So I think unless they were to run it back between Izzy and Pereira, I think Alex is going to go that light heavyweight route and see where he can go with it. But just an awesome fight. Izzy gets the middleweight title back, and we'll see where he goes from here. And more than likely, Alex is going to go up to light heavyweight. And then to focus on the other main fight that we had in UFC 287, obviously the Gilbert Burns-Jorge Masvidal fight. This was completely one-sided. Gilbert dominated this fight from beginning to end, and Jorge Masvidal called it a career, retiring after UFC 287 after losing to Gilbert Burns. And I think this was the right decision by Jorge. Jorge had a phenomenal run in the UFC. And the last couple fights, you could tell that there was a drop-off in his total effectiveness. I'm not going to say that he was a scrub out there in the cage. I'm never going to say that. He has knockout power. His striking power is really something to behold. But unfortunately for him, he's just going up against guys who are just flat out killers. And Gilbert Burns has been on a really good stretch lately. And, I was hoping that Jorge would have his shine, being back in Miami, fighting essentially in his hometown. But it just didn't work out for him. Gilbert Burns was excellent in his takedowns. His ground control was extremely effective against Jorge. And once we got to that third round, this was only a 3-round fight. Jorge looked gassed out there, and it looked like Gilbert was just hitting his strides. So this was a one-sided affair. Gilbert handily won. And when it comes to Gilbert, like I said, has been on a really good stretch lately. Had that nice win against Neil Magny before this fight. Had this completely one-sided, you could basically say a lopsided victory over Jorge. And, even though they lost that Hamzat fight about a year ago, yeah, you take that away. I mean, Gilbert's been on a pretty good stretch lately, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a pretty good fight upcoming when that opportunity presents itself. But, just to kind of round out that Jorge and Gilbert fight, I tipped the cap to Jorge. Had some memorable moments. Obviously, the biggest one that comes to mind was the Ben Askren knockout. It's the fastest knockout in UFC history, where he hit that flying knee. Ben was out like a light. Obviously, that was Jorge's probably biggest moment in his UFC career. But there's a laundry list of how many moments that Jorge had. Obviously, that was just one of them. But it was a very nice career that Jorge had in the UFC. He's got nothing left to prove. Definitely has more than enough money to take care of himself and his family from here on out. And like I said, I tipped it a cap to the guy. But no, UFC 287 lived up to expectations. And if you got a chance to watch it, it's definitely exciting as far as I see it.